Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. Let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another amazing guest. He is a Capital University Law School graduate and currently works as the managing member and attorney at Miller Law and as the founder of the New Modern Lawyer. He's held past positions as counsel to Kendo Delaney and as an attorney at Burton Law. Finally, he is the host of the New Modern Lawyer podcast. Excited to have him on the podcast today. Mr. Brad Miller, welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
Thanks. Good. How you doing, Nate?
I am doing just fantastic. It is beautiful outside. The sun is shining.
It is.
And I can't get enough of that. But Brad, before we get started, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, I mean, I think you did a pretty fair job of going back through the history there. But I am a solo attorney. I focus working with business mergers and acquisitions, so helping Main Street businesses, so people who own and run their own businesses, helping them buy and sell. Somebody looking to start up a business, to sell one that they've been running for years, whatever like that. So I do that work, and I also work with franchisees, so people looking to buy into a franchise.
That's very interesting. I'd love to talk about the franchisee stuff because I'd love to own a McDonald's myself. I eat so much, I should probably own one. But let's go all the way back to the wonderful year of 2003, the year that I was born. So Nate reached Earth and you were going into law school, but you were at Ohio State, the Ohio State University. Never want to forget the Ohio State University. You did some mock trial there. I also saw you were in the Glee Club. I didn't know you were a singer,
Yep.
Brad. So I love to hear that. I'm not a singer myself. I have a terrible, terrible singing voice. My parents always tell me to stop singing because it is just sometimes it's a screech. But later that year in 2003, you would end up at Capital University Law School. Now, Brad, simply put, why'd you go to law school?
I went to law school because I wanted to be a judge. And I knew that in order to be a judge, you had to be a lawyer. And obviously, to be a lawyer, you have to go to law school. So, law school, step one.
So why did you want to be a judge? That's very, very interesting.
Because I saw judges on television and I wanted to be like them.
Well,
So I would watch the TV and I would see judges and I was like, oh, that looks like really fun. I like how they kind of command the courtroom and are very well respected and, helping, with the administration of justice. And so I was like, I want to do that. That sounds cool. Let me be a judge.
absolutely. I mean, listen, any rationale is a good rationale to end up at law school. Now, your first year of law school in 2003, we love talking about the first year of law school. Some people hate it. I got the receipts for it. Some people love it. I got the receipts for that as well. But how was it for you, Brad?
It was a big change from undergrad going to college. It was something that I definitely don't think I was prepared for when I went into it. Um, it just is so different than what I was expecting. In undergrad, you kind of coast through, you show up or not sometimes, depending on how you felt the morning, and you can kind of go through and kind of ride just the fact that, you're pretty smart. So you didn't really have to do a ton of studying. And you could pretty much get by doing that. But then in law school, things was completely different. You were expected to pretty much be there every single day. you're in a classroom of other people who were equally as smart as you, if not more so, and so the kind of floating by doesn't work anymore because now your grade is compared to those other smart people. And so it was a lot of it was an awakening going compared to then going from law straight from college.
So, getting this rude awakening, everyone's as smart as you. And so, going forward in that first year, what were some things that you did to get over some difficulties, get over those struggles, get over that rude awakening? How did you sort of wake up, get yourself into action? What sorts of things did you do?
Uh Kind of just woke up each morning and took every day as it came. I mean, first year for me was pretty rough. Again, it was such a difference than from undergrad, and it just took a while to finally kind of get into the routine, the rhythm, the kind of things that I was expected to be doing in class. The preparation you had to do before you even got there, and then being ready for being called on. So having a different understanding of the material than what you have to do in college. And it took me quite some time to kind of get to the point where I don't know if I would ever say I was really ever comfortable with it, but just to the point where I was able to kind of get through it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, an interesting part about your law school experience is that a year after you graduated law school, you started and you were the owner and attorney at the law office of Bradley Miller. Now, this is very, very interesting. I don't think I've ever had anyone who comes straight out of law school and just hangs their own shingle immediately. So, what went into making this decision to just hang your own shingle starting right out?
I needed money. Uh, I had after getting my bar results, I was looking for a job, and this was 2006, 2007, and couldn't find a job. The firms were already kind of filled up, and I had some other opportunities I looked into, but nothing ever really panned out. And so at some point, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, said, "Hey, you need to do something. Student loans are going to start being due. We have expenses to pay. We have rent to pay. We want to eat. Things like that. We have things that we need to do. We need to pay for. So you need to figure something out here." And I was kind of the point where I had been sitting waiting for a phone to ring with interviews for too long. And she's like, "We can't keep waiting for this. You need to do something proactive." So she said, "You know what? Why don't you just go out and try to see what you could do? You've got this law license, you know, hang it out there and see who comes."
So, what was it like to just start off, hang your own shingle, have, experience in law school, have prior internships, have some experience there, but what sorts of things did you do to sort of get the work start flowing in? I saw as well you were the chair of the solo firm practitioner committee at the Columbus Bar Association. So how
Mhm.
important was to go out there, get those network connections, find people that are doing the same things as you?
So during law school, my third year of law school, I took a class that was called, I think it was general practice class. And the idea was it kind of teaches you some basic stuff about different practice areas to help you go out and kind of be your own lawyer. Um, I found it sort of told me a little bit about how to do the things you need to do a simple divorce or a will or something, but by and large it was pretty much worthless when it came to learning how to actually start my own thing up. um, Fortunately for me, one of my law school classmates had always planned on going out on his own. And so when we graduated, he immediately started getting stuff together. So he started planning, he got an office space, he started buying software and getting everything set up. And while I was waiting for jobs and for people to, for interviews and things, I would hang out with him. And I would go to his office and sit with them and we just chat about stuff. And I was kind of company for him and things. And so when I decided I was going to try it out myself and see what I could do, I kind of leaned on him and the things that we had talked about and kind of copied a lot of what he did for myself. The biggest difference was he was family law, like divorces and that kind of stuff was his big thing. And I wasn't really keen on that. But otherwise, I just kind of took what we had talked about and what he had done and made it my own. And it was, I don't know how many months into that where he and I reached out to the local bar association and said, "Hey, we're new attorneys. We're both solos here. We're interested in meeting other solo, small firm type of attorneys." And the person at the bar association reached out to said, "It's actually very fortuitous that you reached out to me because we're actually trying to get the committee back up and running again, where it had been kind of down for a bit, and we're actually looking for chairs. Would you guys be interested?" And so the suckers that we were, not knowing any better, basically first year out of law school, we said, "Sure, why not?" And so chairs we were.
So, moving forward from that, you then became a managing member at Miller, Dorman, and Partee. So, can you speak about that experience? How was it? And as well, I know you said before that your friend and your colleague had done family law and you were not too keen on doing family law. So
Yep.
through your experience as a managing member, did you ever really figure out what you did want to do with the law in terms of specialization? And clearly you were able to sort of narrow down from, getting rid of family law. I wouldn't want to do something like that because I feel that is always a significant question. I come on here and ask people, finding out what they do want to do, but especially finding out what they don't want to do.
Yeah. No. So, so what ended up happening is I and that actually attorney that had an office that I actually got an office across the hall from him. We joined up with another lawyer, and the three of us formed a firm. And we each kind of had distinct practice areas. One of us did litigation, or one of us did immigration law. That guy did domestic and some criminal law, and I kind of did whatever else walked in the door, sort of. I did some criminal law, I did some litigation, civil kind of stuff, juvenile work, things like that. But kind of just taking what kind of came in. And it was mostly just I knew some things I knew didn't want to do. I didn't want to do domestic work because it didn't have any appeal to me. But otherwise, I just wasn't really picky at that point and just kind of took whatever I could find.
Of course, of course. And I think that's such a great answer because as myself, just from personal experience and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the law, I found out that I actually don't need to figure it out. Even when you're
Mhm.
through law school, even beyond law school, just like yourself, you still didn't figure out what you wanted to do. Now, eventually you'd become an attorney at Burton Law, and then uh I'm missing my spot here. No, I'm not. Yes, an attorney at Burton Law. So can you talk about that experience and tell us where it led you?
So, about a year or so after the three member firm that I was with, Miller Dorman and Partee, we kind of all went our separate ways. Our practices were just too different, and it just didn't making sense for us anymore. So we kind of went our separate ways. And I met up with an individual through a bar association actually, who was in the process of starting up this virtual law practice. And how he kind of described it was that it would be lawyers who could practice kind of wherever. He was based out of another city, out of Dayton, and there would, so it was okay that I wasn't going to be local to that. But basically, there would be kind of a centralized back end. So there would be a centralized billing system and things like that, case management and all that. But everybody would basically kind of practice from where you were. There would be no office really. Basically, we'd be using like virtual office suites and things like that whenever we need it to meet with clients. We'd reserve an hour or something for a meeting space to meet with people. And this would allow us to have lower overhead. So we didn't have to worry about the expensive offices and things like that. It would provide kind of a centralized resources. So there would be, someone did some kind of bookkeeping side and the billing. So we didn't have to worry about that. So we get the benefits of kind of being part of a firm, but yet still had our own kind of a deal. We'd still be running our own show, basically, kind of doing the work ourselves, kind of the work we wanted to do and things. And so that opportunity was really a change from what I was used to. Because going up to that point, I had this vision of what a lawyer was or needed to look like. You needed to be in an office. You needed to be wearing a suit. You're going to court all the time. Up to this point, I've been doing a lot of criminal defense work. I've been doing juvenile appointed work, so I was in court quite a bit for these different things. And I had in my head that this is what a lawyer looked like. This is what we did, right? If you wanted to be a lawyer, this is how you had to act. But this virtual law practice showed me that not necessarily to be the case, that you could use technology to do a lot of the things. You could be doing things remotely. You didn't have to have a central office that you went into. You could work from a office someplace else. You could meet with clients wherever and things. And so it really opened up my eyes to other ways of practicing. And that was one of the big benefits of my experience with Burton Law was that it just opened up that there's other things out there besides what I kind of had this little image that I had in my head.
And after Burton Law, after totally warping the image of what a lawyer looks like in this world, especially as the world was changing, in terms of technology, you got these new computers, you got these new laptops, you got Zoom, you got so many different things that could sort of support you in starting this virtual law firm. You did indeed start that virtual law firm as you were the managing member and attorney at Miller Law since 2012, and to this day, still are. So can you talk about what went into your decision to starting Miller Law and how it's been so far in the past 12 years?
Yeah. So after, and again, it's been a while. So, after a little bit of time working with this firm, with the Burton Law, started to realize that this wasn't really wasn't a good fit. There's a lot of really good things that I found that I got out of it, but kind of some of the financial stuff just makes sense. Like I didn't need most of the back end that they were providing. And so a lot of the money that was kind of the money that I was bringing into the firm was covering things that I wasn't using. And so I'm like, well, why would I do that if I can just, kind of handle most of that stuff myself? And so we kind of parted ways, and I after kind of going through that and other things, a little bit of gun shy of joining with other people at that point. Because I'm like, do I really need others? Well, I mean, the extra expenses. Like I can keep things down and easy myself and streamline. So, so 2012 it was. I kind of went back out on my own, kind of from where I started. And like you said, it's kind of been there since. The
So,
roller coaster of, yeah,
of,
handling things on my own again.
of course, of course. So going back a little bit in time from 2012, you began as a speaker and presenter for lawyers and business owners across the country. You got some presentation names here. We got ethics and business acquisitions. We got vital steps of an acquisition. And we got episode 13, the last lawyer is that 13? I don't know if that's 13. Is that 8? Would that be 8? XII, right? No, that's 13. The last
Right.
lawyer educating while entertaining. Now, can you talk about your time speaking, doing presentations? You still do today. So what kind of presentations do you do? And what do you talk about when you do your speaking events?
So back probably about the time that I started with Burton Law, I started getting some invitations to do some speaking, some kind of CLE kind of related stuff. Mostly at that point, it was very basic stuff on, business law and stuff like that. And CLE companies are always looking for lawyers to talk on ethics because most all states have some sort of an ethics requirement that you have to have. And so every presentation, they want to have ethics component into it. So they're always trying to find lawyers who would talk on ethics. And again, me being the naive, gullible one, I was like, sure, I can talk on that stuff. And how it plays a role in practice and that kind of thing. And so started talking on things like that, on technology. Again, kind of Burton Law really introduced me a lot of the technology that you could use in law firm. I mean, I got my first iPad as part of Burton Law, so I kind of got into all that stuff. So start talking about how you use technology and had the ethics of using that. Because at that point it was still very new for a lot of lawyers and they were still hesitant to use some of these things or weren't sure how to use it. How do I use practice management software? Do I need practice management software? Things today that we're like, oh, it just seems common sense, things you need or whatever. But back then it was not and most files were kept in by paper still. Attorneys had file rooms filled with filing cabinets and with files in them, lots of paper. And so it was trying to say, hey, you don't have to have it that way. You can have, you could go basically paperless. You can't get rid of all paper, but you can dramatically cut down the paper that you use through scanning, through not printing things out unnecessarily, through using email and different things like that. And so again, that kind of started me down the path as I developed my practices and I started focusing more on the M&A stuff. I started talking more specifically on those kind of topics because that's what I was working on. And then one of the things going all the way back from when I started with the Bar Association, as the chair there, one of the things that I've always been kind of really passionate about is helping other sole small firm lawyers get started. Because I know how rough it was for me trying to find jobs and then start my own practice without really having any information about it. And, kind of being thrown out there and having to struggle a lot my first years out. And so I've wanted to help other lawyers avoid some of that struggle that I had to deal with. And so that's been a real big component of the things I've been talking about throughout the years is how do you start a law practice? How do you take the law practice you have and make it so that it works better for you? So it's not just a kind of like, oh, I'll take things as they go, but more, intentional when you're designing things, something that's going to actually make you happy, that's going to make you money, that's going to be a good fit for you, as opposed to just kind of taking whoever comes in the door and all that stuff that I had to do the first couple of years.
So those ideas, those presentations throughout all those years, your love for technology, your passion for helping those small firms, those small solo firms start out on their own, I would imagine turned into the founding of the New Modern Lawyer as well as the New Modern Lawyer podcast. So can you speak about that? One of your big things are you're transformed through deliberate design, core business competency, mental mastery, and powerful positioning. So can you speak about that and what you talk about on your podcast as well?
So the podcast is one that I actually did. I don't know how many years ago it's been now. We started it. Well, it was before the pandemic is when I actually did all the recording of the episodes. So I've got, I don't know, a dozen, or I don't even know how many episodes I've got at this point. That's how long it's been. It's not active currently, but there's a lot of different episodes on just running a law practice and a lot of the stuff that kind of goes in the mental side of it. That you don't have to necessarily do things the way that everyone else says you have to do. That you can actually create a law practice that doesn't require all the long hours and all the other stuff that we kind of take for granted as being part of the law practice. So that's the podcast side of it. And then also kind of the rest of that is the idea of just helping lawyers, whether that's through coaching, whether it's through mentorship, but just being someone that can talk to them about these things, to show as an example that this stuff is possible, that you don't have to have the big fancy formal office and all that stuff, that you can practice from home. I've been working from remotely since 2012. Show. Wow. So when the pandemic stuff happened in 2020 and everyone had to work from home, it was not a big deal, right? Like, I mean, so here's your fun story for today. So when the pandemic was starting to hit, we had been planning a vacation to Hawaii for over 6 months. And we were scheduled to go on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th of 2020. So as this coming approach, we're starting to get into March, and all of a sudden things are shutting down. And so we start getting worried, like, is this going to happen? Should we just like scrap the whole thing? And my wife's like, no, screw this. We've been planning this for a long time now. We're going, until they say, you can't leave your house, or, there's no flight, we're going. So I made it over to Hawaii, to Maui. And while we were there, the flight shut down. They stopped flying. So we were in Maui. We were supposed to be there for around about 2 weeks, I think. We ended there for 6 weeks before flights resumed again to be able to go. But I had my laptop with me and we had internet. So I was able to practice from the beach, just like I was practicing, from my house. No different. And everyone else is like, "Oh my God, this is the work. Like, how are we going to do this? Like, we can't get into our office. Like, we have to figure out technology." And I'm like, "I've been doing it since 2012. Like, this is no big deal for me. Like, nothing. It was, and so, you know, um,
I mean, listen, there's nothing wrong with an extra 4 weeks in Maui,
there
Hawaii.
are a lot worse places to be forced to, yeah, shelter in place than on the beach. Exactly.
I was gonna say, I'm like, listen, I mean, the world was falling apart, but it's like, hey, I'm on this beach in Maui, and I still got my business going, and it's very, very funny that from 2012 you're doing the virtual practice, and 2020 rolls around, and now pretty much everyone has a virtual practice. Pretty much,
Yep.
people, they got trials on Zoom now. They got all this stuff, all this technology, and you're just sitting here like, oh my God, we're gonna have to stay at home and work from home. You're like, oh, I've been doing this for 8 years.
Welcome to the club. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Welcome to the club. Now, something I want to ask about in terms of mental mastery. What sort of mental mastery do you mentor to people, to new lawyers, to the solo practitioners? What is that all about?
So everything that as a lawyer or as a person really that you do, that you have, that you say, all those things are all based on your beliefs. And these beliefs are actually things that you were taught, that you learned from other people around you, friends, family, people close by you, things that you learn from society, the things that are in the media, on television or whatnot, um, things you were taught in school, the different ways that you need to you need to study like this, and you need to get good grades so that you can do this, and all these different things that we were taught or that you just picked up from the world around us, such as, to be a lawyer you need to look like this and talk like this and act like this. All those sort of things we've kind of been indoctrinated into. And one of the first steps to change your circumstances, so if you're not like where you're at, if you are like, hey, I'm not really happy with the way my practice is right now, one of the very first steps is to acknowledge and realize that that is the case, that the things that you believe that are actually causing your actions or causing the way things are all based on things that you were taught. And because they're things that you were taught, that you learned, that also means you can unlearn them. You can learn new things. So if you start changing your beliefs about things, change the way you think about things, you can then change your circumstances. You can change the way your law practice works, what happens in your life. But it all comes down to, again, your mind, your thoughts, your beliefs.
We're traveling down this windy philosophical road here, and I just love it so much, I have to say, Brad. But it is very, very true that you are what you eat in terms of, the people around you, the stuff that you do is very much a product of the people around you, of the things that you do, of the actions that you make, as well
Mhm.
as the beliefs that you hold. Now, in thinking about this, in thinking about how rooted a lot of our beliefs can be through, being in school. I went to public school for my entire life, and I didn't study until sophomore year of college. So I had no idea how to study when I got to college. So what
Mhm.
advice would you have for people in terms of uprooting those beliefs and uprooting the sorts of things that are just ingrained in their system that they have to get out in order to move forward with their life?
Well, I said the very first step is acknowledgement, is being aware that you have these beliefs, that that is what's actually driving these actions, the way you think. Realize that the world around you is that way because that's what you believe. And so the first step is that if you want to be able to change that, you're going to be able to realize that you can do it through your thoughts. That's up to you, that you can make those changes yourself, that you have the power. You know, if you feel like you don't have power to change things, that you're a victim, you're just stuck there, you're doing stuff. So first you gotta acknowledge what's going on, what's happening, the way the kind of things work, and then start figuring out, what do you really want? What is it that you want your law practice to look like? What is it that you want your life to look like? Do you want to be working, you know 6 days a week for 10 hours a day? Is that what you want? Do you want to have, work 4 days a week? Tim Ferriss talks about the 4-day work week. Is that what you want? Do you want something like that? Do you want to be able to work from remote locations? Do you want to be like a digital nomad where you're working from Bali and Europe and all these other places? I know there's lawyers that do that. They like to travel and things. Is that what you want? Because you can do all those things, if that's what you want. You just have to figure that out first and then decide, all right, what do I need to do to make that happen? And so it's breaking down what's important to you. What do you want? What do you want your law practice, your life to look like? What clients do you want? Who's your ideal client? And then start to make plans of, all right, cool. What do I need to do to make that happen?
Of course. I mean, I have to agree with all that. What you just said there was so, so powerful. As well, The 4 Hour Work Week, one of my favorite books ever. I picked it up earlier this year and I just love it. Of course, I love Tim Ferriss. As a podcaster myself, it is a required listening that I listen to Tim Ferriss if I want to get any somewhat good at what I'm doing here. So shout out to Tim Ferriss. I know he's not listening, but hopefully one day he does. But now, speaking of Tim Ferriss, I have to ask, it's very interesting your perspective that you're coming with because you had the virtual law practice since 2012. You've been doing this for a very, very long time now, and it seems as if the pandemic sort of catapulted that sort of way of doing things, that virtual law practice. Can you sort of describe your perspective on, I guess, the legal field through being so early at the virtual practice? Was there any points before the pandemic when you kind of saw virtual practice emerging, or was it just after the pandemic happened, it was like everyone just started doing it?
Well, I said when I started with Burton Law, which was the virtual law firm, that really got me thinking that this is something that you could actually do that could actually work. I said everyone got an iPad in the firm, so you were able to, it wasn't just take my laptop someplace, but I could take this iPad to this little tablet and I could work on the tablet. Um, and so that really kind of started to get the wheels spinning about what was possible. The fact that I didn't necessarily need a formal office. I didn't need clients to come to me. For those first couple of years, particularly, I would meet the clients. So I wanted to meet, so we'd go to a coffee shops, or a restaurant or something, we'd meet. And I did that a lot for those first couple of years. I just travel and meet them. I didn't have them come to me. And that wasn't something that I ever would have considered prior to that. I would have thought, I'm the lawyer. I have an office. They need to come to me. Like that's how it works. But I was starting to realize that doesn't have to be that way, you know. Um, but the legal profession, lawyers are very conservative by nature when it comes to the way we work. And so while I was seeing these possibilities, there's not a lot of other firms or lawyers that I saw around me doing it. There were a couple, sure, that were out there saying, "Oh, I really like what you're doing," or "I'm kind of doing something similar to that." But by and large, it was still, "Hey, we got an office, we have to work this way." That was kind of the extent of it. Um, Things were slowly moving as we got into the late 2010s or whatever, 2018, 19. But it really was when the pandemic hit that I think a lot of firms were and lawyers were forced to face the fact that there are other ways that they can practice. That just because they had always done it one way, that doesn't mean that was the only way it could ever be done. And so it would really force them to step outside that comfort zone, that box, and try to really consider what other ways can things be done. And that was a really, I know obviously there was a lot of difficulties that people dealt with during that time, but a lot of good actually I think came out with it for the legal industry, legal profession. Um, the downside I think is that lawyers, the legal profession, were kind of going back to our conservative ways since that's calmed down now. Whereas a push for going back to the office, you know, there's a push towards doing away with some of those things that we learned. We learned we can do all these things remotely, that we can do these things using technology. And now people are, well, maybe we should have everybody come to the office because we want people there in person. Even though we've shown through the pandemic that people are just as productive or even more so if they're not in the office, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, I've seen changes. The legal profession is slow to go to go to them. Um, and I guess part of my job is to try to kick them down the road a little bit further and kind of push a little bit more.
So, speaking of these virtual law firms, now, when you're looking to help maybe a solo practitioner or firm itself get into the virtual law firm sort of field or, I guess, sector of it, now, what are some core principles that you tell people when starting a virtual law firm? What are some things they should know before embarking on this new journey of theirs?
First of all, it has to be something that you want. I mean, it has to be yes, you have to be able to practice the way that makes sense for you. And so if you've got a family, traveling around the world as part of your practice might not be as realistic for you, because you've got other obligations, you have other things that may be more important. This is why I always have people I work with, we go through and establish our values. Where is family in your list of values? Where is travel? Where is, making money, wealth, all those kinds of things. Like, figure out where is that these values lie so that you can see when you have a decision to make between two things, which one do I need to weigh more heavily? And sometimes that is, what I really need to be for my family needs a solid place. Like running around the world right now isn't really going to work out for me, and that's fine. Do what kind of works best for you right now. But it's being intentional about it. It's figuring out one step at a time what you want, and then figure out what do we need to do to make that happen. If you want to work remotely, if you don't want to be in an office, you're going to need to make decisions like the practice areas that I do are going to be ones where I'm not going to require people coming to an office, So if you're going to work from home, you're probably not going to want criminal defense clients coming to your house, right? And so that's something to take into consideration. If that's what if that's your practice area you want, but you don't want to have an office, well, then you're probably going to have a meeting spot of someplace to meet with people. If you're going to do an area where it requires court visits, you're going to be in court a lot, that's going to impact where you can be. You have to be able to get to court. You have to be willing to, your schedule has to be flexible enough to deal with court coming up, because court's going to say, here's the hearing, here's when you need to be here, so you need to kind of be able to fit with what they require. And so it's just figuring out what that needs to look like, what clients I need to work with, what practice areas, what roles I would be doing, what I want to be spending my day doing. Do I want to be spending my day arguing? Do I want to be spending my day doing research or writing? I know there's attorneys that make a great living doing appellate work. Like, they come in, they just basically most of their day is writing briefs and researching. They can work from pretty much wherever. Maybe they show up for an oral argument or something, but there's a lot of flexibility in different practice areas and things. And so it's kind of looking at the big picture of what you want and starting to put the pieces together like building blocks or like Legos of what it needs to look like to make that all happen.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablaster.com today and enroll in the law school operating system. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show. Yeah, it very much preaches what you say, having that deliberate design, being very, very intentional about what you're looking for, what you want, figuring all that out. And of course, it seems like sometimes for some people, maybe it may seem like a lot of hand waving, why do I have to figure this out? Why do I have to think about all this stuff? But when you're so deliberate about it, when you're so intentional about it, you'll get the results that you're looking for. You'll achieve the goals that you're looking to achieve. And I think it's just such a beautiful picture to paint. Now, and speaking of all this technology, and speaking of all these virtual law firms, Brad, we're now down to our last 5 questions. The first of the 5 questions is something I've seen throughout my entire journey doing this podcast, and you have certainly seen a lot of it through your own journey, having a virtual law firm, having one, being on the forefront, pioneering that sort of way of thinking and that sort of way of doing things. This is the tech stack question per se, but what sort of technological recommendations would you have for people in terms of maybe new software products, AI products, pretty much anything? What are your recommendations and what does your tech stack look like, Brad?
So, despite everything that we've talked about to this point, I don't use AI. I use only the technology that's necessary to do the things that I need to do. I've seen through the years that it's very easy to get enamored by the latest, the shiniest, everything that all the tech that comes out, like new stuff's coming out all the time. And it's very easy to see something come out and feel like you need to have it. I need to have the newest version of this, or I need to, have that. I caution that it can be really expensive really fast to do that. Like if you're always buying new gadgets and stuff like that, every time, it gets really expensive. And same thing with software. Like it's very easy to start getting in these subscriptions and it's only $100 a month or something. And it's, this is only $75 a month, but then you add them up and you're spending $4 or $5 grand every month on these subscriptions. And many of them you may not actually be using or not using to their full potential. Some of them you may duplicate tasks and things. So when it comes to technology, I try to use only what I need to the fullest that I can. On a day-to-day basis, I use Microsoft Word, because my practice is heavy in contracts. So I use Word to draft things. I use Word to exchange documents and things between opposing counsel, red lines, things like that, revisions. I use Clio for practice management. I've been using that. That was one thing that we used, the Burton Law. That was back when Clio really was getting started. And so I've been using Clio since then to keep track of matters, conflict checks, things like that, and to help with billing. Obviously, email is important because that's how we communicate 95% of the time. But I don't really use much more than that.
There's nothing wrong with being simple, straight to the point, intentional.
And it helps. It's just me. So I don't need a lot of other things. Like I don't need to do a lot of collaboration because I'm not working directly with other attorneys. I'm not working. I don't have other staff members that I'm trying to coordinate. If I did, I'd probably need to add a couple more tools in there for collaboration purposes, for sharing things internally. But because it's just me, I don't need all the bells and whistles and all this other stuff. I can keep it very simple and very compact, and I can keep it, $300-$400 a month in overhead.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to that point of being intentional, knowing what you want. If you don't need it, even if you want it, if you don't need it, you probably don't need it. So it just goes back to that point, just like you said, of being intentional, making sure you're looking for the right things, using the right things, not chasing the shiny object as much and as fun as it may be, as I do a lot. I love chasing shiny objects, but as fun as it may be, when you're running a business, you got to think about the important things, about the money flow, about the revenues, about all that stuff, cutting all that overhead, but still using those products that really, really help you and give you the things that you need. Now, fourth to last question here, as we were talking about the 4-hour work week, is a great segue into the fourth question. But live on Lawyers in the Making podcast, Brad, what are your book recommendations for people? You have a beautiful bookshelf there to the left that people can't hear, the people listening can't see it, but it is very
Yes.
big. It's at one, two, that's 4 shelves. It's got 4 shelves. That's a lot of books, probably over 100. But what are your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law, just some of your favorite books, something you give a gift to someone.
Uh, so I don't read many business books anymore. There was a time probably 4 or 5 years ago when I was really into a lot of the business books, who I'd written the Tim Ferriss's and Seth Godin's and all those kind of books, and a lot of good ideas and things like that in those books. But it feels like that we come to a point where we're just getting to a lot of rehashing now of things, where the new ideas are less and less, and it's more of just a different spin on something, maybe. And so I really don't. I mean, I've got books up there like that on my bookshelf, but I've not opened them up in years for that reason. They look prettier, like pretty on the shelf, but they're less useful right now. Um, I I don't really have a book recommendation, just simply because I don't do a lot of reading at this point. Um, I'm very intentional about the media that I consume. And so I want to make sure that the things that I am looking at, that I'm reading, that I'm listening to, are things that are going to be in my best interest to do so. They're going to help go towards my growth. And really right now, more so than how do I 10x my business and all that kind of stuff, I'm more focused on living what I consider more of a balanced life. I'm more concerned about, being there for my family, for my daughter, as she's in elementary and growing through school. I'm more interested in, my own personal growth and things. And so the kind of things that I look at now are more um, inward focusing, spiritual related, things like that.
So would you have any, now speaking my language, talking about spiritual stuff, inward stuff, do you have any recommendations in terms of inward or spiritual things, or maybe a book you're reading right now that you're really enjoying surrounding that topic? Because I always love recommendations.
Well, and if you really want a fun dive into something, I've actually been rereading right now the Carlos Castaneda books.
Oh, oh yeah.
So those I'm working on back through those right now, at least the first couple of them. The Four Agreements is a good book. The Kabbalion is another one as well. Those are all sort of a little bit more of a spiritual bend to them. But I feel that a lot of the things that you are in there apply universally across life, not just so.
So, and speaking of spiritual, one of my favorite ones, I love The Alchemist. I only read it a couple of months ago for the first time, but it is and still is one of my favorite books I've ever read in my entire life. And it's very simple, really quick read. People like in middle school read it all the time. From what I've heard, I've talked to people about, they're like, oh, I read that in middle school. I'm like, that's pretty crazy. But
Yeah.
moving forward, you said before that you're
Mhm.
very intentional about the things that you consume. And that's
Yep.
exactly what this question is. So, what do you consume on a daily basis through social media, whatever it may be? Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, any podcasts you listen to that you recommend to people, any Substacks that you read. What is crossing the transom of Brad's mind on a daily basis?
So I am very, again, intentional on the social media that I am involved in. So LinkedIn is my big one. That is where I go. That is where I am on talking different things, posting about a lot of things we talked about today. In fact, um, a lot of things towards lawyers and how you can just be happier in your life, in your law practice. Um, I do have an Instagram that I use, basically look at pretty pictures. So I pretty much have just having it limited to just pretty pictures of different places, which is what it originally was for. Like that's why Instagram was originally there, was for people to share photos. And then it kind of got turned into this business thing, and I try to stay away from that side of it. And just focus on using it to make pictures that make me happy to look at. So I don't really use the other social media stuff. It's just too much noise. And it's just too toxic, the stuff that's on there. Um, I do listen to podcasts quite frequently. I have a podcast that I'm currently doing now on spirituality as well, um, which is called Walking a Spiritual Path. I do with my friend uh, Jason Medford, and that want to go down the rabbit hole of the alchemist and that kind of stuff. A lot of that along that line. We go through a lot of different things on that one there. Um, as far as other podcasts, people I listen to people like James Wedmore, who talks not only about spirituality stuff, but also about businesses, about running an online business, particularly. Um, and while I think a lot of lawyers are going to say, well, I don't really, my business is not really an online business, right? Like it's not, I'm not selling stuff, I'm not online or whatever. There's still just a lot of, I think, really good information that you can get um, from them. Because I think one of the things that I see a lot of lawyers do is they think if it's not law specific, it doesn't relate to me. And that's a mistake. um, Most of the things that I've learned that I've been able to apply to my practice have actually come from outside of the law practice. So maybe it's things that I've seen from the accounting field, or other doctor engineers, other professionals do, or even just general stuff. Like I get a lot of I get a lot of insight from companies like Apple, the way that they do business. They're not in the law legal field. They're primarily selling products, but there's a lot of stuff that you can learn from them that you can apply to your law practice. If you really look at that and you get past the mindset of not a law, not a firm, whatever. So yeah.
I have to say, second you on that point, applying things outside of the law practice. I mean, not specific to the law practice, but applying things outside of whatever domain you're in and using those different domains to apply the principles, bring them over. I couldn't agree more with that. I actually think this is my blazing hot claim, my hot take. But I think one of the best business books ever is The Prince by Machiavelli. I think it's one of the best business books ever. And I took a read through it a couple months ago, and I was like, this has a lot to do with business. I don't know how, but it
Mhm.
always just comes back to a ton of principles I see through a lot of like Apple, Amazon,
Yeah.
a lot of those principles that they use to, grow their companies and accelerate their companies and accelerate the products. They use the same principles that Machiavelli was using. And so that's my blazing hot take, whatever. But
Yep.
second to last question here, Brad.
Mhm.
You're working, you got your virtual law firm, you've been working from home for years, but what does an ideal
Mhm.
Friday night and Sunday morning look for Brad?
Friday and a Sunday morning, huh? Um, well, right now my daughter is doing writing lessons, so that's generally Friday evenings. As we're going to, she's doing writing lessons. We'll go out to dinner and do that. Yeah, at this point in my life, I'm not really going crazy. I'm not going out and doing stuff. I would much prefer to be kind of alone and just kind of here at home and stuff. So, and as far as Sunday mornings, I like to just be able to sleep in a bit and relax, have some quiet time. Um, not having to get up and start thinking about client stuff like I would do on a weekday. But just taking time for me, drinking a cup of tea and maybe, maybe reading through some LinkedIn stuff or, just taking it easy and just kind of enjoying the peace. And
Of course, I mean, the me time is very, very important. You can't give it away to everyone. You got to give yourself a little bit of love. Always, always, always. Now, last question here, Brad. I do this at the end of every single episode. But what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
there are so many different ways I could go with this. Um, I would say kind of reiterating what we've been talking about a lot throughout this conversation is just to be intentional. So when you start deciding what you want your law practice to look like, what you want to be doing, be intentional about how you design it, about thinking about what you want, what's important to you. When I started my law practice, how many years ago, I just kind of jumped in and didn't have really a plan of any sort. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't really know what I wanted to do practice wise. I didn't know what I wanted my law practice to look like outside of what I kind of envisioned a lawyer had to look like. But I didn't think about what I really wanted, what was important to me at the time. I just kind of went and took it and just I kind of use the analogy of I kind of just jumped into the moving river and just kind of let the current take me where it will, which can be fine when you get started out because you don't know what you want to do. Again, I wanted to be, I thought I wanted to be a judge that's why I went to law school. And I realized shortly after coming out of practice that I had no interest at all in doing what judges do. Like that they got no, either the television made them seem one way and being there an actual person watching judges was totally different. Like you never really they really never get to focus in on one particular case or get really invested in something. It's all very moving one to the next. No one's ever happy with them, regardless of what they decide. Somebody's upset and pissed off. Like they can't, you can't really win. You don't get that respect or that picture that you get on television is not actually the day-to-day running of a judge and what it really takes. And so, you don't know what you may think you know what you want to do going into law school, but I would say put that to the side and just try everything out first because you might be surprised of what you like, what you don't like, what actually works out for you. I clerked in law school at an insurance defense firm, and I'm like, oh, I totally want to do some sort of like insurance defense or something litigation law like that. And I quickly realized after a couple of years of practice, I hate dealing with insurance companies. Like there's no way you can do like criminal defense or insurance defense work or PI work if you hate insurance companies like that. You don't deal with them. Like, and so I hated contract. I didn't understand them in law school at all. It was terrible. Now that's what I do every day is with dealing with contracts, right? So the stuff that you think that you like, that you think you want to do, that you think is what the direction you want to head may not be where things go. So while you need to I be intentional about what it is that you want, but you also need to be flexible. You need to be willing to keep watching how things are going and what's important to you because it's going to change over time. When I started out, it was just me and my girlfriend at the time, so we could kind of do whatever we wanted and didn't have a lot of responsibilities. We didn't have a house, we just had an apartment, so not a lot of stuff. Now you've got kids and pets and a house and all the other stuff, and things change. What's important changes. Your values will change. They'll evolve over time. The way that you want to work, the things you want to do changes. I lived in the city when I was in law school and when I graduated and all. Now I'm out in the middle of the woods, basically. Like I want to be away from all that, so I've changed. My practice has had to change too. And so be intentional about where you are, be flexible about where things are going, and always just kind of keep an eye out on, is this still feel in alignment with me and with what I want? And if so, great, keep going that way. And if not, make a shift. Like any decision that you make, none of them is ever permanent. You can always make another one if you don't like where things are going.
Well, Brad, that's beautifully said. As the great Greek philosopher Heraclitus says, I think that's how you say his name. I definitely butchered it. But the man who steps into the river and comes back to that same river, nor the man or the river are the same. But Brad, that is the podcast. That is the episode. So thank you so much for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com, lawyersinthemaking, one word, substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.